Okay, so we've talked a bit about mycorrhiza. Um, let's think in more detail. So mycorrhiza is an example of a beneficial or cooperative interaction among organisms. There's sort of a spectrum of beneficial organisms, right? So we've already talked about mutualism. That's what mycorrhiza is. We think it's obligatory, although I'm not actually sure that's true because plants can potentially live without mycorrhizal fungi. The idea is it's obligatory. Both organisms benefit. We can also have what some people will refer to as synergism, where it's the same. Both organisms benefit, but it's not obligatory, right? So the organisms may or may not cooperate depending on the situation, and we can think about when that might be the case. A lot of people describe mycorrhiza as obligatory, but I'm not so sure. We know the plant for sure can live without the fungus, and it's sort of hard to know what the fungus is doing in the absence of a plant. It's hard to find it, it's so little. And then the third sort of spectrum of beneficial interactions is called commensalism, where one organism is benefiting, but the other organism just doesn't notice. So it's like the one organism is benefiting the other by accident, and it's kind of at no cost, and so, hey, that's fine, let that be. In terms of evolution, right, mutualism is an example of what we call coevolution, right? It requires, if you think about the mutualism of pollination, it requires, right, that the bee evolve adaptations that allow it to benefit the plant, and that the plant evolve adaptations that allow it to benefit the bee, right? So it ends up becoming the interdependent evolution of two or more species that are having a clear ecological interaction. And it's a really nice way of sort of thinking about the ecological theater and the evolutionary play, right? And that you have this theater of ecological interactions and this evolutionary play unfolding inside of organisms co-adapting to each other. So what I want to do now is sort of walk you through sort of three different categories of beneficial relationships that we can have. The first is a resource-resource relationship. The idea is that this is a form of trading, which is sort of what mycorrhiza is. The idea is that organisms are exchanging physical resources. The plant is trading carbon to the fungus, and the fungus is trading nutrients to the plant. So there's an actual physical sort of exchange. Yeah, I just said that. You can also have what are called service-resource relationships, right? Here, one organism exchanges something physical in return for a service, right? That's probably what pollination is. The plant is giving nectar to and pollen, which sometimes the bees eat. So it's a physical trade in exchange for spreading pollen around, in exchange for sex. And then, of course, you can have service relationships. Here, the idea is that there's two services being exchanged, which they might come at a cost, but nothing physical is actually exchanged, right? And these are relatively rare for reasons that aren't clear, at least in the plant kingdom. And I'll talk about some examples, but one that we've already talked about is probably indirect defenses. So when plants signal to a predator to come and protect it from an herbivore, right? There's a sort of dual service there. The plant's advertising where there's food, and the fungus is protecting the plant from damage. So it's almost like a service-service mutualism, even though we've already talked about it in the context of an indirect plant defense. This is going to be a bit of a short video, but I think I'm going to stop it here. Yeah, for the time being. And we'll pick up, not surprisingly, we're going to think about a game on the other side.